So what I have here is a hammer, and I'm going to do a quick vacuum form mold buck for just a 3D printing application for vacuum form for quick packaging, like a sort of just one of those card / clamshell type things. So just taking a look at it here, it's pretty good. There's a lot of detail in the scan that we obviously don't need. We just brought this thing in, and so we'll probably want to do is a little bit of smoothing on this mesh before we do some surfacing stuff and some of the hybrid modeling stuff that we're going to do. And then we'll also probably do a little bit of an offset, and then do some extrudes to get some of the area that we'd want to see on the draw for the back end of this thing. A sort of spacer to get it up and just make a nice draw section that we can vacuum form around. So the first thing I want to do is line this thing up a little bit on a coordinate system here. So planes are kind of just wherever they were from scanning. One of my favorite ways to do some of this stuff, and it's not always really well used, is I like doing a view clip. What I'm going to do is use the central axis of the handle here, and I guess just the butt of it to line it up, and then we'll make some other plane geometry. So let's do an inside box here, which is my favorite view clip, because it's easy to manipulate. I'm just going to chop the head of the hammer off here, and that'll just remove the data set from what we're working on. Next thing I want to do is pull out this center axis. So let's come in here and grab a vector, and then I'm just going to do a find revolving axis, and we're going to highlight the whole thing and let DX figure it out for me. So I'm just going to hit preview on this guy, see what it comes up with, and that's actually looking pretty good right down the middle here, almost exactly on the thing. So let's put use normal, and let's actually uncheck remove outlier, see what that looks like. And it's about the same spot. So it does look pretty lined up right down the center there, so it looks close enough for me. Yeah, it's pretty much right on that lathe mark from when the handle was turned. Cool. So let's look at some planes now. I should expand that out, turn my vector off, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do a mirror plane, I think, on the front side of this thing. So let's grab this and let's do a draw line on this guy to create a plane just from our view. So I'm just going to draw a line down the center here, and hit OK, and then back a plane here. Let's do mirror, and I'm going to grab that plane and our mesh, and hit OK, and it should give me a perfect mirror plane on the side of that thing as a preview, and it actually did a much better job from the direction I was looking at. It wasn't very close apparently, but figured it out anyway. Yeah, let's kill plane 1 there since I'm not using that guy. Yeah, that's good. So let's kill plane 1. I'm just going to delete that now so I don't confuse myself in a second here. Let me turn off plane 2. I'm going to look at it. I could do another one here down the center and look at it. And have it do the same thing, but since I already have that central axis there, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going to rotate this one about the axis. So let's grab the axis in this plane and another one, and we'll do a rotation 90 degrees, and we'll see how that looks. That actually looks really good, so we'll stay with that. So the other thing I want to do is I wanted something on the face here, just to put our base coordinate system at along this vector. I could probably put it on the top of the hammer or something too, but it doesn't really matter for what we're doing. So I'm just going to grab a plane and then I'm going to grab this vector and we're just going to do extreme position. So, and I'm going to grab entities, so we'll grab our mesh for that, and then direction, I'm going to grab my vector, and my arrow is pointing the right way, so that's good. Let's do a little preview of that, sticking it right at the end of the mesh that's there. So that looks good. Now that we have all of these guys lined up here, if I want to, I can come back over here and turn off our view clip. And then let's align this thing. So I'm actually just going to hit interactive alignment. Yeah, we can pre-align with global origin if we want to. Plane, let's say we pick, let's pick that as our Z up. And X and Y look pretty good. So vector, let's do that guy. See if we flip that, it's downwards. Yeah, now we want that. Position, we'll slide him down to the bottom here. So standard 3, 2, 1 alignment looks pretty good. So now before I kind of get rid of everything here, I'm going to turn all this stuff off and just look at my front top right and make sure everything's lined up the way I like it. That looks pretty sweet. So let's do that guy. One of the reasons I was just using the vector, the handles, even though the head is probably cocked, on the handle, it's probably not exactly square. So just one of the reasons why I did that. But so let's come in and we can get rid of all of this reference geometry. You can see it's out in space; it doesn't move along with the mesh. That's the case we wanted to translate something else or something else back there. Won't bother to move it. So. If I were to region this thing and had some fancy regions on here, it would have all been tied to the region. So that's one way to get everything to move with the mesh if you want to. But so now that I have this done, let's come in and do some stuff on the mesh to clean it up. So again, the surface detail is pretty high, and let's just look at the edges for fun. Check that out and see what it looks like. So you can see they're kind of uniform, they're kind of all different sizes, just from the way it was meshed after it was scanned. So let's come in, and one of my favorite ways to smooth is to just essentially remesh the thing. We could come in and use the smooth function or whatever and butter things up a little bit that way, but actually if we come in and do something like a rewrap, there's a bunch of smoothness stuff in here. So we can leave about the same amount of edges if we want to. We can look, and we have like 1 million polys here. So that's not too big of a deal. And then I'm just going to crank the smoothness all the way up. It's already there from where I sort of have it. And if I wanted to, I could play with some of the mesh density here. We're going to surface it, so there's not a whole lot of reason not to let it round some of the edges of this guy off if it needs to. So I'm just going to hit preview on this guy here. It should smooth out pretty well. So now with this guy rewrapped, you can see it's a lot smoother. So it got rid of a lot of the small detail that was in there. We could have used this to decimate it a little bit if we wanted to, just to make it even a little bit smoother. But let's just accept that for now. And then if I want to, I can actually come in and do a smooth sort of after the fact. Again, I'm just going to pull this up all the way. Hit next, and that did butter it up a little bit more, which is nice. So we can do that. So this is kind of our base mesh that I'm going to start with. Since this is done and it looks pretty good, I'm just going to run Healing Wizard on this quick. We did remesh it and smooth it, so we might as well let this guy go through and fix any stuff that it wants to fix here. So it did fix everything. I can make sure I don't have any holes, and I'm not seeing any boundaries lit up here. There's no arrows, nothing to check, so we have to make sure we have no holes in the object. So at this point, what I'm going to do is duplicate the mesh out. So I'm just going to keep this one as stock in case I really mess something up and I just want to go back. So I'm actually just going to hit copy and paste, so just control, I'm just going to do a control C on that guy, and then we can do paste. So now we actually have a duplicated out mesh. I'm just going to use the blue one because I like to look at it better, but I'll leave that one sit there. So now I have this guy in here. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger, just so when we make a mold of it that it's a little bit proud of the surface. That way when we form over it, there's a little bit of play between the actual plastic and the object, or the right size, correct size object. So what I'm going to do is come in here, and we're just going to do a volume offset on this guy. Let's do like 0.5 millimeter. So, and then I can, of course, zoom in, make sure we're going the right direction here. It's kind of easy to tell if you zoom in a little bit. You can see which direction everything's going when you reverse it here. So that looks good. So now the whole thing will just be a little bit bigger than what we were at. So now our mesh is offsetted. It's just a little bit bigger. If we want, we can look back to our original here and see it's decently bigger. So I can start doing some fun stuff with this guy. So yeah, let's look at this. So our center plane is still going to go through the middle because it offsetted equally in all directions, so I don't really have to worry about spacing on stuff like that, or where our center line is. So what I'm going to do is, at this point, just surface this guy. So let's run Healing Wizard from our offset mesh, see if there's anything here. Doesn't look like there is, but okay on that. But now that that's all clean, we can come into exact surfacing, and we're just going to hit auto surface on this guy. I'm going to pick more mechanical, just to get a couple, probably fewer patches. It's just more of a squared off algorithm on your patch count here. I'll let it auto estimate. I'm just going to do a constant fitting, and we're going to go pretty, I'm going to go pretty loose on the capture accuracy here. It'll still be really, really close. I mean, we're in within a couple of thousandths. We're good to go as far as that's concerned. I can hit next on this. So now we have our patch network. It looks pretty good. I don't see anything like too crazy. It doesn't look like anything sucked under the mesh. It looks like it's pretty well exactly what it needs to be. So I don't think there's anything I need to really adjust or fix on that. I'm sure we could get sort of finicky if we wanted to about moving stuff around, but for this application, it doesn't really matter where our patch lines are, and I don't really have to worry about setting sharp edges or anything like that that I might do if I was being a little bit more finicky about the surface. We're really just going to use this as a block. It's nothing that's going to be machined or anything for this application. So I'm just going to come in and turn our mesh off. So our surface looks really good. So the next thing I'm going to do is look at our front plane here, and I'm just going to use this to trim our mesh. Now there's some things I could have did with the mesh if I really wanted to, and sort of clean up this, where this area is. We can't really form over something like that because it's going to make a mess. But I think it's just easier to fill that in as like a quick solid in this application. So I'm not really wasn't going to worry about mesh editing on it. And again too, we could have made a bump out block here or something like that if we wanted to, but they're relatively, in manufacturing speak, they're going to be pretty flat on the top here. And we left a little bit of play. Again, remember it's a 0.5 millimeter offset in all directions, so there'll be some room, so I don't really have to worry about that piece of wood sticking through. So I'm just going to just come into model here, and we're just going to cut this, use that center plane to cut our solid object. And we're just going to keep the top. So now we have a nice cut on that. And then, like, this is a pretty small area, so we're just going to draw a little block to fit in there. So I just don't like looking at my plane, so I'm going to turn that off. So let me look at my front plane here, and then we'll do a mesh sketch on the mesh to pull that out. The mesh sketch is, the mesh is going to be slightly different size than the actual surface part here. Like I said, again, it's going to be within like probably a thou or something like that. And what I'm going to do is come in, and I'm just going to window this down so I can have my arrows in a nicer spot to play with. And I'm just going to come up on this guy here. Oh, and we're going to pick our offset mesh there. So I always forget when I have more than one mesh in. Select the one I want to actually use. Come like halfway up that tooth. Or I'm going to come up to the point where the taper sort of starts on the inside here. So just to get some of the extents, just so I can draw this extrusion straight down from that point. So that actually looks pretty good. And we'll hit OK on that. And flip this guy back upwards just so it looks nice for me. Hide my solid here. And if we want, we can sort of look at the mesh and just figure out where that needs to be. So it looks like somewhere around in here to somewhere out there. Make it just a little bit bigger. So hide the mesh again. And I'm just going to come into Auto Sketch, and we're going to do something like this. Maybe add that in. Maybe we'll add that line in there a little bit too. So it looks pretty good. That doesn't need to be that long, but that's okay. Auto Sketch is really handy for stuff like this because, I don't really want to trace the outline. I guess we could throw a spline in there or something if we really wanted to. But I think like a line arc is just going to be a little bit nicer. So let's turn this mesh back off. And I'm just going to throw my disjointed ends on just to make sure I don't leave anything pieced. And I'm going to, it was about here where the line was, so I'm going to go from like there to something like that. I can trim this guy out here, and we can do corners, why not? And I'll do this and that. Okay. Again, I'll look back to my mesh, make sure it's out far enough. It does look like it's out far enough. Maybe I'll slide this guy up a little bit more. That looks pretty good. So, exit my sketch. And then we are going to turn the mesh off, turn my solid body back on here. And we are going to just extrude this guy out as a little block just to fill in this area. And I'm actually going to come up, higher than the gap. And I want to make sure that, there's not going to be any like noticeable step in my actual part. So I might take a back and forth once or twice here to get this right. So let's come in here and extrude that guy out and see what it looks like. Actually, it looks pretty good. There's a little bit sticking out here and on the top edge, but other than that, it looks like it's pretty straight down in. So what I'm actually going to do is get that extrude, and we're just going to throw a little bit of draft on it. So pick our front planes, our neutral plane, and then we're going to draft the whole part essentially. So going to grab all of it. Let me turn this off so I can see. We don't care about that face or that face. Actually, we don't even care about that face. So let's grab all that and let's see what 2 degrees looks like. Put that back on. Looks like it's getting close. Yeah, it's definitely inside everywhere from what it looks like in the preview here. So let's do okay on that guy. See what it looks like. Definitely buried right in there. Nice. So now that we have that chunk in there as a filler piece, I can come in and just boolean these guys together. So let's add this guy, and we'll merge them. Cool. So now what we have is essentially the top section of our hammer that the mesh is going to fit, but we want to kind of extrude that down to what the table would be here. And you can see that even our center plane, if I just offset it down, it's going to offset down in this direction. It's going to offset to like where it touches the end of the handle here, but it's going to leave a lot of room underneath the head of the hammer. So I'm just going to use one of our, extract another plane out, and what I'm going to do is like try to just fit it to where that data lies. So I'm going to hit extract here, and I think I'm just going to, let's see if I can grab it all this way. Looks like it could work. So I'm going to grab our lasso. So yeah, we got like some of the top edges here, which looks good. And I'm going to deselect some of this stuff here. It curls down around the edge. And that looks pretty good. Let's take some of this off. And we want to be on max bound. And let's see where that plane is. So now what we're doing is basically fitting a plane to the outermost extents of all the high points of this hammer, and you can see that the that middle bulge is really close, but no cigar if it was laying on the table. So let's pick this guy out here and hit OK. Now that we have that, I can come into our extrude here, turn my mesh back off, and what I'm actually going to do to get this out, see there's a little divot here, I didn't look at the bottom before. We really don't want a void inside when we're printing it, so if I just extrude something out, it's going to leave a little void here. So let's actually go back to our sketch here, edit that guy out. And we can move this guy down a little bit, and this guy down a little bit, and hit OK, and we got rid of that hole. There we go. So it's always kind of fun doing some hybrid modeling with some random stuff to make sure you get everything filled in. But anyway, so let's at this point, best way probably to offset this is with direct editing. You're not really just going to be able to move that face because there's like a ton of little long lines here. So it's going to be a lot to calculate in the background. It might be a little bit messy. So just offset the surface. But what we're going to do is, I don't really have to offset it. I just really want something to thicken. So what you're going to do is 0 offset on this, and it's going to create just a separate surface of the top edge of that part. So you can see we have, if I turn off my base extrude, I just have a thin feature there. So, but it's at the exact interface of that part. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to thicken the surface, and I'm going to grab that top surface there, and I'm just going to make sure I thicken it higher than the plane that I want to trim with, which is like the back end of the hammer there, where it's going to basically sit on a table, or the back end of the card that'll slide in around the mold. So I'm going to leave that there just like that. This is one of those things where you might even want to get this plane that we made here and offset that up a little bit. So we do have some play underneath the hammer, because if you remember, we made it a little bit bigger. So It's going to have a little bit of play around it already, but if you did keep things a little bit tighter, you could always offset this plane just to add some more leeway of play back and forth here in that Z direction. So once this part is made, so now I just have a thickened surface there. I can come in and boolean these guys together. Hit OK. So now I have all one solid block. And then what I'm going to do is come in and cut this block off to fit the back of my hammer and target this guy. Hit next, and we will do this. And then once we have the bottom selection selected here, hit OK, and now you can see that it's trimmed with that plane. The thing I could do now is if I turn my hammer back on, you can see that right where those edges are poking out is where we fit our plane to. They're not really actually poking out, but it's just graphically, if I look on it, you can see them come and go a little bit. But yeah, so now we have a buck that we can directly go send right to print. And if we're going to go to print, one of the best things that we could do is we might as well mesh it in Design X. Design X is a great meshing software, even for CAD models and things like that. We've been doing it a long time working with meshes, and we've put a lot of time and effort into our algorithms to make really clean meshes. So what I'm going to do is, now that I have this solid body, is I'm going to come in and hit Convert to Mesh. I'm going to pick our cut body here. There are some quality settings you can play with, so it depends on the density you want for your mesh. There's some advanced stuff in here too if you really wanted to specify some triangle sizes and things like that, and some other things that go along there, but we're actually going to just turn all of this stuff off here. And I'm going to hit preview. And you'll see it was instant that we made a really awesome mesh. But I can come in and you'll notice the triangle sizes are nice and evenly distributed, things like that. So there is not going to be any errors when you come in to go to print. The other thing is, let me turn off that cut body there. And one of the biggest things is also possible hidden errors in the mesh. When you go to send that to a printer as an STL, if your print software doesn't take CAD formats directly, but we can come in at this point and hit Healing Wizard, and you can see the mesh that we just made usually will have no errors in it. So it'll be a perfect watertight mesh with no folded poly faces, no rogue triangles, stuff like that, and you'll be good to go. Once we're done with this, we can just right-click on the mesh itself, hit Export. We could dump this right out, as an STL or OBJ, things like that. To get this CAD piece out of here, we could also, if we were going to send to a print software, we could also right-click this guy and just export this as a standard CAD transfer format to get that out. Or if we were going to send this into another environment to maybe dump into a package to put into the rest of our frame and mold and stuff, we could actually live transfer this to any of these CAD programs that we have installed here, and it'll transfer in with a full history tree. You can see lots of videos of that online, so I'm not going to show off that right now. But yeah, thanks for checking this out.